part of getting to what matters is taking the time to ask the questions. And as leaders, as human beings, we can't have all the answers. And part of leadership today comes from the willingness and our curiosity to ask the questions and to seek the input from those around us. You know, there used to be this old thinking about leadership, which is, I'm the leader, I have all the answers. And that doesn't work anymore. Command and control leadership, do as I say or else, doesn't work. And you can get anybody to do anything for a short period of time, but you won't get their heart. And part of leadership today is where the head and the heart are combined. And getting to people's heart is the willingness to include them in the conversation and to include them by asking the questions of what is going on around them. Every answer you need in an organization is with the people on the front lines, your staff, your colleagues, your teammates have the answers if you're willing to ask. And part of that is, one of the big questions to ask is, what does success look like? So often with women, as I travel around the country, so many women share with me, you know, I kind of just have let life happen to me. I just kind of take my days. I live an inbox life. Right? Inbox life is, we just respond all day long to what everybody else wants. Right? Emails, meetings, what everybody else wants us to do, and we don't take the time to ask the question about, wait a minute, what does success look like? And how do I go about getting there? One of the great lessons that I learned, and forgive me if you've heard this before, but it's such a valuable story that I learned as COO of the Obama campaign, which is how Barack Obama, I believe, won the election. Was the key thing was in 2007, so I take you back a few years, we forget, in early 2007, nobody thought he had a chance, right? And he had less than 10% name recognition, and he's a black guy with a funny name. So us early people on the campaign he was so thrilled that we had chosen to work for him, right? We forget this. And we had one goal in 2007. Success, what did success look like for us in 2007? Winning Iowa, the first caucus state. Why? Because if we won Iowa, we were in the game. If we lost, we were out. So everything we did in 2007 was about winning Iowa. And our campaign manager, David Plouffe, would say every day, what are you doing today to help us win Iowa? And you can imagine, as the campaign started to heat up in 2007, everyone had an idea of what he should be doing. And I myself even went to Plouffe once. I said, I got this call from this group of actors, and they want Obama to go to New York and do this event on education, and they might do a fundraiser. And he looked at me and he said, and what does that have to do with Iowa? I was like, you're right. You can go to Iowa and do the event. And in that year, we put $8 million. We put 250 young organizers on the ground. We opened 40-plus offices. No campaign had ever had more than 12. And there's 99 counties in Iowa, and Obama went to every one of those counties in 2007. And on January 3rd, dates are in my brain forever, January 3rd, 2008, Barack Obama won Iowa by 9 points. And at that moment, the world said, okay, he's in the game, right? So I ask you, what's your Iowa? And do you know, right? In an organization, when I've asked leaders for my book, what's the number one reason why someone in your organization failed under your leadership? The number one reason why someone failed in your organization, the answer was they weren't clear about what their job was. Because most people are living in inbox. And we as leaders, for ourselves, we have to decide what our A's are. What are our A's? A's are the things that move what matters in our life forward. Most of us, it's so easy, myself included, to get caught up in the C's and D's of our life. The C's and D's, because we think we need to respond to every email, we need to go to every meeting. I now do something very different in my life. I look at my calendar with my assistant on a regular basis, and I look at my calendar and I say, what on here do I not need to do? And as Jim Collins says in his work, It's just as important to have a what I'm not going to do list as a to-do list. And I'm very clear in my life now. I've gotten very clear. My A's are 3 things: my family, my work at Bentley, and my leadership work. And everything that comes across my schedule, I say, does that fit in to one of my A's? The priorities of my life. And if it does, I'll consider it. And if it doesn't, I won't. And a lot of women, and myself included, we have a very hard time saying no, right? We want everyone to like us. It's just naturally who we are, right? We want everyone to like us. And so someone says, Betsy, can you do this in July? And what's our first reaction? Sure, right? And then you go back to your office and you're like, what did I just say yes to? It has nothing to do with any of my priorities. And then we're annoyed, right? So now I give you a little tip, what I always try to do. We're always still processing and working on this stuff, but what I try to do is say, thank you for that opportunity. Let me get back to you to see if that works in my schedule. And then I go back to my office or my house and I'll look at that and I'll say, that does not fit into one of my priorities. And I'll call the person back and say, you know what, I have a schedule conflict. Thank you so much. We as women do not have to give reasons, right? We also, it's the other thing. Well, I'd like to do it, but my daughter has this and my husband, whatever. No, men don't. They say, you know what, thank you so much, I have a schedule conflict, right? So getting clear about our days, our life is how we spend our days. Our days are how our life turns out. And how we manage our time and how we ask the questions about what success looks like. Does this activity help me to get to success in my life? The other thing I wanted to mention about this is that this asking of a question is so important in our relationships as well. Asking about what someone you're working with, what success looks like for them. So I'll just tell a little story that happened to me. One of the greatest parts about managing a team of people at Bentley is that I'm still in the game of trying to lead. And what happens sometimes with management consultants is we get up here and we talk and all of a sudden it's been 10 years since we've worked in an organization, right? This keeps me humble. And recently I had this experience where my Center for Leadership is a $5 million that donors gave to our center. And one of the donors gave $2 million, so it's a key piece of our center. And this particular donor is difficult. But when I first got to Bentley, I was under the impression that we could be girlfriends, right? And I'm casual. And Wendy knows, like working with me, I'm kind of casual. And so this particular day, we had this meeting. I have 2 dogs that I love, and my puppy Sadie, she's a mini golden doodle, and she was new. We had just gotten her, and that day I had to take her for her shots. So I thought, well, I'm going to bring Sadie to the office, and this donor will love meeting her. Not so much. And I was actually a little bit more casually dressed. It was in the summer, and in academia, we don't dress up in the summer. But this particular donor came in a suit, and there I was, casual with my puppy. So she was not happy. And I realized quickly, now this is a very important donor. Like, this is someone my success, what success looks like, is this donor being happy, right? So I took my little puppy and gave her to my with my assistant, and I came back in, and I sat with her, and I said, first I said, I'm really sorry, but I really want to know what success looks like to you. Like, what do you need from me to feel respected? And this is what I call level 2 listening. Most of us level 1 listen, which is, I'm talking to Wendy, but I'm listening to her, but I'm really thinking about what I'm going to say next. So I'm not deep listening. And when we deep listen, sometimes we have to stop the little voice in our head, which is to protect ourselves or, right, have a comeback. Well, no, be defending yourself, right? But to level 2 listen, you really listen. And what she told me that day was very simple about what she needed and what she expected. And what she expected was meetings with her and agenda, materials to her before she comes in, that I don't bring my dogs to the office, at least when she's not there. I know when she's there. And I got it. I got it. And I just listened. I said, I hear you. And from now on, we will adjust accordingly. So now, anytime she is near my office, or we have a meeting with her or a board meeting, materials ahead of time, I do all the things that she has asked for, and we have a very good relationship now. And we work through it, right? So part of it is asking the questions. And it works at home too. It's an amazing thing to actually ask your people in your life. And my husband and I have been doing this for a long time with our little daughter. And we'll sit her down every so often and we'll say, Madison, how you doing? Like, how are mommy and daddy doing? And what's working and what's not working? And you really find out, and to ask someone, what makes you feel loved? It's a very interesting question. And my daughter has always said from the time she could talk, which is time alone with you, Mommy, without your phone, right? And recently a woman who heard me talk about this called me at Bentley and said, I want you to know I went home after I heard you, and I did this with our daughter. We adopted a little girl from Cambodia when she was 6, and she's now 11. And we had never asked her kind of how she's doing. We just assumed, right? We assume a lot of things. And we sat her down, we said, honey, Mommy and Daddy just want to check in. How are you doing? And how are we doing as parents? And are you happy? And she was kind of taken back, and she said, oh, I'm so happy, and I'm so, grateful to you. But they kept saying, well, through the conversation, well, what could we be doing better? And give us some really honest feedback. And she stopped for a moment, she thought about it, and she said, you promise your feelings won't be hurt? We promise. She said, Mommy, you're a horrible cook. So she said, I miss my food from home, from Cambodia, my Asian food. And then that night they decided they would take a cooking class together and learn how to make the food. She called me and she said, I never would have known that had I not asked. My daughter would have kept that inside her whole life, right? So those are the things. And so I challenge you all to think about, in your life, add one activity to your life where you ask your team. And we all say, we're so busy, right? We're so busy. How do we possibly make time? One of the things I did in the Obama campaign, which worked wonders, in the campaign, all of a sudden you go from like 30 people to 700 people overnight. And as a COO, I felt like I didn't have a touch point with the people in the team. So I started something once a week. I hosted a breakfast. And I asked, there's 10 departments in a campaign, and I asked one young person from each of the divisions. Now, everyone in a campaign is young. They're all 25. So I asked one person from each division to come have breakfast with me. It was an hour and a half out of my morning, once a week, and I asked 3 questions. 1, why are you here? What made you want to come and be part of this campaign? It's an amazing thing to ask in your organization. Why are you here? 2, what are we doing right? What are we doing right? And 3, what can we do to improve? How can I make your life better? And you know what came up out of that? After 3 weeks, I kept hearing the same thing, right? And one of the small little thing that was upsetting our young people in the campaign was, in Chicago, where the campaign was, if they were to take a cab to the airport, it was $50. If they took the T, or the L, it was $2. So we said we don't pay for cabs to the airport. But if they were coming in late at night or early in the morning, some of them were afraid. I heard that 3 weeks in a row, and I said, oh my God, we're making that change. I went to our campaign manager, I said, let's make this change. And we said, we hear you, and we're gonna make this change. Anyone who feels afraid after 9 o'clock or before, I can't remember exactly, will pay for a cab, right? And the things that we couldn't change, we got back to them on. We heard you, but this is why we're not able to do that. I cannot tell you how that once a week breakfast had such an impact on my job and my ability to know what was going on. So I challenge you to think about, add one activity in your schedule every week to ask the questions. Wendy.
My turn. I'm taking notes. Okay, well, I love this topic of asking questions mainly. It's an occupational hazard. I'm an executive coach, Even though I run a corporation with 45 people working for me, I still do some coaching myself. And that's actually how Judy and Julie and I met. Once a year, we do pro bono work at a leadership institute, and we provide executive coaching for participants at the institute. And so asking good questions is really, really important. And it's not that it's important unto itself, it's important because it helps us and others get to what really matters. And I don't think there's anything more important than that. And so my favorite question in the universe is, what's most important to you about that? There's two ways to say it. Actually, it's probably many ways. But the bottom line is like, why does this matter to you? Why do you care about this? I have a coach. Coaches have coaches. That's another occupational hazard. It's good to be walking your talk and be in the experience of being coached while you're coaching others. And my coach asked this question a little too much, in my opinion, because it annoys me, but it really helps me get to the root of what's really important to me, even though it annoys me. So it's interesting. I wonder why it annoys me. That's a conversation for another time. So you can use this for yourself to help yourself and others get past sort of the surface issue, because if you ask somebody a question about something, they'll give you an answer. But as we know, that's usually not really the only part of the answer. There's always something underneath it. And we think it's important to explore what's underneath the answer in order to find out where the power is. So I used this last week with a client. So I have a potential client that I'm in the proposal stage with who said we want to do this senior team initiative with our executive team. And we'd like you to submit a proposal. I went, yay, great. And during the initial conversation, I said, well, what's most important to you about that? Why do you want this, essentially? And he said, well, I'm not sure I have the right individuals on my team, he's the CEO, to meet the future direction of where we're going. And we're going to be doing a lot of acquisitions, and I don't think I have the right team, and I'm just not sure. Now, I could have stopped there, because that's a decent answer, right? But instead, I decided to go one more. And so I said to him, well, why does that matter so much to you? And what's most important to you about that? And he said, well, if I don't have the right people, I'm not sure I can pull off what I've committed to our board of directors. I stopped there, but in this moment, I now realize I could have gone one more. And why is that most important to you? Because then we get to the issue of why it's really most important to him. What about this? About having the right team? I mean, it's obvious on one level, but somehow deep under, it really does impact who he bees in the world, who he is in the world, and the contribution that he's trying to make. So I say we keep asking that question until there's nothing left, which is the part that annoys me, being on the receiving end. But being the one to ask the question, it's really powerful. So I now want to talk about the second half of this slide, is how do you know if you're starting something new and you're experimenting, and what we're talking about here is a new way of leading and doing it as women. And so how do you know you're on the right track? Well, I'd like to use us as an example. So when Judy and Julie called us to ask us about doing this, we both individually went through the process of asking ourselves these 4 questions. I learned these 4 questions at Babson, at a course called Entrepreneurial Thought and Action, which is actually before you even were at Bentley. And Len Schlesinger, who is the president of Babson, who's retiring this June, was conducting this program. He was doing a little side thing with a friend of mine, Charlie Kiefer. And they developed a course called Entrepreneurial Thought and Action, and they wrote a book called Just Start, which I highly recommend if you're thinking of anything at all that's entrepreneurial, even if it's inside your organization. So they ran this program for 2 years, and I took it 7 times, because every single time I went, I learned a different part of how to implement being entrepreneurial and thinking through stuff. Even though I've been an entrepreneur for over 20 years running my own business, I had no idea. I was doing it by the seat of my pants, and it worked out great, but now I had a structure. So the structure was fabulous. And so these are the 4 questions that they recommend that you stop yourself and ask. So we did this individually, and then we did it together. We had a conversation together. Is this doable? Is this something that we could imagine that we would do together? Is it worth doing? What does that mean? For each of us, that's, a different answer, right? What makes it worth it? Well, for me, being able to make a contribution, being able to be in the women's space and inspire more women, I would say we share that together. I don't know, anything else you would add?
Well, I think the part of the reason I wanted to do this was because of my relationship with Wendy, right? So much of the things some of the things we decided to do is because of the relationships and the friendships that we have, and we do things for each other. So for me, as much as being here was the opportunity to do something to do something with Wendy and something she wanted to do, and she was the impetus for this happening.
Yeah, and we share that, right?
Yes.
Sometimes
Yes.
you bring something, sometimes I bring
Yes.
something. And so we support each other, which, by the way, we don't do very well as women. And so we'll talk about that more in a little bit, but I do want to circle back to that. So, and do you want to be the one to do it, whatever the it is? Can you visualize yourself there and doing it? And of course the answer is yes, because here we are. And I'm having fun, are you? And then lastly, can you do it? Can you do it? Is it reasonable to do it? And how will it fit in? And Betsy would say, is it one of my A's, right? Is it one of my top priorities? Does it relate under the umbrella of the things that are most important to me? So another example of this I talked about earlier for me was about 6 years ago. I started dreaming about women's leadership. I don't know why, but I did. And I started to think about what makes us, what gives us power to do really what we want to do and what we really dream about doing. And for me, for many years, I was thinking small, and I blame it on my husband. Now, I don't know if that's just convenient or not, but I do. I blame it on him. I'm not married to him anymore, by the way. I have a new husband. Stuff happens. And from very early on in our relationship, he would say to me, well, why do people pay you that much to do that kind of work? It's just like people work. That's not like real work. I was in human resources, right? I went, this is real work, and they are paying me because I'm worth it. He was going, I don't know, I'm doing real work. I'm a CPA, and I'm doing real work. And I really felt there was some river running underneath me that I thought I wasn't really worth it, whatever that meant. I'm not really good enough. I only have so much. And other people will think, I don't know, I'm not as powerful. I don't know even the right words. I'm not enough, is I think one way I would say it. And I think many of us have a conversation.
The chatter in our heads.
Right.
It's the other thing that I hear so much as we go across the country, the chatter in our heads that is not helpful. And someone gave a little tip to me on that, is when you start to have that, say one thing in your head, cancel. Cancel. Delete, or delete, that works too.
Yeah, that's good. I picture the little guy on my shoulder flicking, doing the little flick thing. So we all need techniques.
Yes.
So what I thought when I started to dream about women, I thought, this is great. It's good to dream, which is, I think, the reason I wrote my book, Creating Your Next Bold Move, and the 9 Steps to Do It. But what am I going to do about it? For me, it's not enough to dream. And to think about what really matters, I have to put it into play. So I didn't know what that meant, except I knew I had to do something. So what seemed like a good idea at the time was to call 10 girlfriends and say, do you want to get together? I'll serve tea and chocolate, and let's just talk about what we're doing in our lives. And so it relates to these 4 questions in just a moment. So at the end of the night, so we do what all girlfriends do, and we got together. They came to my house. It was a beautiful summer night. We sat on the porch. I served tea. We ate chocolate and more chocolate and more chocolate. And there was a box of Kleenex, and most of us cried. Because when we got to the part of talking about where do we feel stopped, what really matters to us in our lives, and where we feel stopped, we all cried. For ourselves, because we stopped ourselves, and for each other, because we felt so bad for each other. And so at the end of the night, I said to the 10 women, this was good, right? They went, yeah. Do you want to do this again? They said, yeah. Can we bring someone? And that was over 1,000 women ago. And so now I run 2 women's personal leadership women's retreats twice a year, once during the summer and once in the fall. So it went from this little nothing of bringing girlfriends together in my house to a pretty substantial women's leadership retreat, 2 of them. And when I made the transition, I asked myself, and every year I still ask myself these questions. Is this still doable? Is it worth doing for me? And that's actually one of the toughest answers for me, because we don't make a lot of money. You know, I do it out of the passion that I have, really. Do I want to be the one to do it? Well, now I bring in speakers, so I don't have to be the only one. And can I do it? Is it mine to do? So getting to the place that really matters, your sweet spot, we think is really important.